Avengers Infinity War gave us the first in-depth look at the Mad Titan's plan to cull half of life in the universe in order to save the existence of living creatures as a whole. He tells Gamora that it's a simple calculus, that the universe is finite, its resources are finite, and if life continues to remain unchecked, life will cease to exist. Shortly after the release of Infinity War, many started to notice some flaws in the Mad Titan's plan, with figures such as even renowned as astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson questioning why Thanos simply couldn't just double the resources of the galaxy. If he has the power of the universe in his hand, then surely providing more resources to the beings of the universe would not be out of the question, or so many would claim. Well, stick with us, watchers of the Marvel multiverse, because we believe we may have found the reason that Thanos believed creating more resources would not be a viable solution, even with the power of all 6 Infinity Stones in his grasp. It's important to note, however, that there are a few very simple explanations that are worth at least mentioning. It's very likely that this was simply a movie that required stakes, and Thanos simply relished in the destruction despite vehemently denying that he did. He even says so in the original Infinity War trailer, famously stating that fun is not something one considers when balancing the universe. But this does put a smile on his face. He likely basks in the glow of the power and the desire to feel like a god. But for this video, we'll be exploring some of the more practical downsides to creating twice as many resources overnight. With that out of the way, let's get straight into it. The rapid creation of resources is prohibited by 2 fundamental factors under the established rules of the MCU, the laws of physics and the laws of economics. Let's delve into both briefly. First, let's look at the prohibition of resource creation based on the laws of the universe and the laws of physics as we know them. The MCU functions on a basis that there is no such thing as magic, only advanced science, and even the so-called magic we do still see still obeys the laws of physics, including the fundamental law that matter cannot be created or destroyed. We see this when Thanos snaps, as his victims are dissolved into dust, which is blown into the atmosphere. Endgame shows us a reality in which what appears to be increased smog seems to have overtaken New York, but seeing as production has rapidly halted, that's implied that this dust is actually the ashes of the decimated. When we see Monica Rambeau being reverse snapped in WandaVision, the dust particles recollect and reassemble her physical form, meaning that her matter was never destroyed, only disappeared. Wanda's magic works on the same principle, transmutating matter into different forms. Monica Rambeau discovers in WandaVision that she simply rearranges the atomic structure in objects to make them take on different forms. But even her, the Great Scarlet Witch, cannot create or destroy matter. Neither can Doctor Strange nor the Sorcerers of Kamar-Taj, seeing as their solid light constructs are composed of the same photons of light that are constantly around them, again just reorganized into different forms, from shields and whips to illusionary holograms. Thanos even states in Endgame that he seeks to use the stones to shred this universe down to its last atom and rebuild a new one, seemingly from the atomic remains of the one he just destroyed. Meaning that even with the seemingly limitless power of the Infinity Gauntlet at his disposal, the stones can only bend the fabric of reality to the user's will. But they too must obey the fundamental laws of the universe that they play in. The stones can act in a way that they wish within the bounds of the laws of reality, tapping into the forces of the universe that seem impossible. But even the great and powerful Infinity Stones utilize the fundamental forces of existence as physics dictates. Therefore, creating infinite resources in accordance with the population would require taking matter from something else entirely, be it abandoned, lifeless planets or desolate recesses of space. This would fundamentally unbalance the delicate universe that allowed for the creation of life in the first place, with extensively far-reaching ramifications that could pose far more harm than Thanos wishes. Thanos simply does not have the ability to rearrange the universe by creating matter out of thin air, let alone deciding when or where to create the vast array of objects and scenarios that constitutes the term resources. Resources as a term incorporates food, water, clothing, shelter, tools, and a limitless array of needs in infinite different combinations. While the Infinity Gauntlet is theoretically capable of distributing these resources accordingly, Thanos has a finite mind and cannot even begin to fathom the logistics necessary to perform such a feat. Aside from simply not having the available matter and ability to create resources out of thin air without monumentally upsetting the delicate balance and stability of the universe itself, Thanos must also adhere to the laws of economics. Though we here in the real world only have earthly economics to cite, every civilization we've seen in the MCU has a governing body that closely resembles a system that we have here on Earth. These governments, corporations, or otherwise dictate the distribution of resources from the Kree to the Xandarians to the people of Earth. Therefore, the fundamental laws of economics would still apply to these civilizations, as they exist in a similar system to earthly economics. Supply and demand constantly exist in tandem with one another, dictating prices and availability of goods. If a monumental surplus of supply is suddenly thrust onto the universe, then the price would consequently plummet uncontrollably in accordance with the laws of supply and demand, and their inverse relationship. This instability would tear apart the governing bodies in charge of distribution, and would ravage the various economies of millions of planets affected by the snap. Prices of goods would flatline, allowing these new resources to be sold at incredibly cheap prices, which means that the institutions in charge of distribution can no longer adequately pay for the various costs of production. Workers would be unable to be compensated, seeing as the company is making pennies on the dollar. Widespread layoffs cripple the company, which no longer has the manpower or means to distribute the resources efficiently. Though there are hypothetically some governing bodies in the universe that may be able to resist the impact based on sheer goodwill and the desire to help without compensation, the various governmental and corporate philosophies that we have seen here on Earth would all crumble under the immense weight and pressure that creating new sources out of thin air would cause, and it stands to reason that various intergalactic governments follow similar structures. In destroying half of life, however, he not only accomplishes effectively the same goal, but he rallies the survivors around a shared trauma. We see the direct results of this throughout The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as we explore the remains of a world which was unified by the decimation. Karli Morgenthau and the Flag Smashers are the survivors of a world that cared for one another, where humanity came first. The survivors rallied and banded together, sharing resources, sharing help, and sharing services in order to keep the world running with what few remained. For the first time in the history of Earth, borders fell, nationalities melted together, and the world was, for 5 years, unified under the common banner of humanity itself, undivided by country, creed, race, belief, or orientation. There was minimal division in the new world, only the unity of humans coming together in a time of crisis, bringing out the best of themselves, and this is the reality that Karli and the Flag Smashers are seeking to return to. A world without borders. While there still was likely discourse between people during this time, the unification of the majority of mankind likely far outshined any destruction that humans were doing to one another. But that's just what we came up with as to exactly why Thanos decided not to double all of the resources of the galaxy. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of these explanations? Do you think that this makes sense as to why Thanos simply couldn't create more resources? If not, then what other solution do you think could explain why he decided to eliminate half of life instead of doubling the resources? As always, these videos take a lot of research and effort, so if you could find the time to like the video and comment down below, that would help the channel out a lot. As always, my friends, hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and have a great day.